of strength there, but all of this coming at a time when here in Washington, I will say, Matthew, we are waiting for a vote in Congress on a bipartisan war powers resolution, which would seek to at least get lawmakers to put their name on the record with regards to where they stand on this war, ultimately a war that was launched without congressional approval.
And Helena, it was interesting because Pete Hegseth insisted the US could outlast Iran. Obvious questions about the stocks of missile defences and interceptors. Still questions, though, about the overall objective, who the US supports to take over in Iran, and questions, too, about working with Kurdish militias. We still don't know the answers to so many of those things.
No, indeed we don't. And I think trying to preempt one of those questions with regards to stocks and weaponry, we did hear from President Trump on his social media platform, Truth Social, yesterday, where essentially he said that the US had enough munitions to continue this war, quote unquote, forever. Again, when there are those significant questions over a timeline, there are questions about what would be considered a victory, where the end point is for this from the United States. Initially, as we know, President Trump had called on the Iranian people to rise up and topple the regime. Since then, the Defense Secretary has said that this is not a regime change war. Initially, of course, we had heard that this was about going after the nuclear program. Since then, President Trump has said that this is also about going after ballistic missiles so that they can't defend a nuclear weapon in the future. We've got Gulf states now, which will likely be looking at the US administration as they face attacks, calling on Mr. Trump to try and find a quick off-ramp, essentially, as they come under further Iranian attacks. And then, of course, here in the United States, we are, 8 months out from midterm elections, when President Trump will be facing questions about the aim and the potential longevity of attacks, depending on what we see, at a time when a lot of US voters elected this president over concerns about the economy and immigration.
Helena, thanks for taking us through all of that. I just want to briefly return to that Pete Hegseth news conference, because he was asked by our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman about that strike on a girls' school that killed so many in Iran on Saturday. I just wanted to play you the exchange of questions and answers. Have a listen to this.
Thank you. Tom Bateman with the BBC. Can you give us an update on what the administration knows, what you know now about the reported strike on a girls' school in southern Iran on Saturday?
All I can say is that we're investigating that. We, of course, never target civilian targets, but we're taking a look and investigating that. Red tie in front.
Just on the basis that with the information you would have, your reconnaissance abilities, ability to gather information, I mean, it's several days on now. So is there any clarity on whose munition this was?
We're investigating it.
Well, interesting exchange. Let's head to Westminster. Let's talk to our political correspondent, Harry Farley, because we had Prime Minister's questions a little earlier. Harry, take me through what Keir Starmer said, what the opposition pushed him on, and did he address directly that slight from Donald Trump of yesterday, you'll know Winston Churchill?
Not directly, but there was an overall defence from the Prime Minister to his approach to this conflict, for his justification for not allowing the US military to use British bases for that initial offensive action against Iran, although then allowing them to use those bases for that defensive action to target those missile launchers and so on. A broad defence from Starmer of his position and of the actions he has taken. But the thing that I was struck the most by is that so often when it comes to international conflict, the House of Commons, and particularly the Labour and the Conservative parties, are often broadly in the same place. There is a kind of quite commonly a coming together. Doesn't always happen. You know, think about back to when David Cameron was considering whether to strike Syria back in 2014 or so. That it doesn't always happen, but quite often it does when it comes to foreign policy. That is not the case at the moment. Kemi Badenoch, the leader of the Conservatives, very on the front foot when it comes to her criticism of Sir Keir Starmer, particularly of that decision not to allow the US to use those military bases, and actually not to allow the UK military to be involved directly themselves in this war. She says that we're asking our allies to do what we should be doing ourselves. Of course, British bases have been targeted, that base in Cyprus, and her argument from the Conservatives is that the British military should be directly involved in retaliating against that. Sir Keir Starmer, for his part, defended his action. He said he wasn't prepared to involve British troops without what he said, without lawful a basis and a viable, thought-through plan. The implication, of course, is that he thinks that the US and Israeli war does not have a lawful basis and does not have a viable, thought-through plan. And as you mentioned, that criticism from Donald Trump, I mean, it's fair to say that relationship between those two men that was so often the sort of pivot point, the central thesis behind Sir Keir Starmer's foreign policy, that is at an increasingly low point.
Harry, there at Westminster, thanks very much. Let's turn to Mikey Kay in the studio with me. Harry, Mikey, a lot of attention on HMS Dragon. We know it's going to go, but not till next week now.
Yeah, Type 45 destroyer, Matthew. I think we've got some footage of the Type 45. We can just take a look at that, give the viewers a little bit of a look. It is the UK's most advanced air defence surface warship. That's the Type 45 there. It carries an air defence system called Sea Viper. That's not the name of the missile. That's the name of the system. The missiles it carries are the Aster 15 and the Aster 30. The Aster 15 has a speed of Mach 3. The Aster 30 has a speed of about Mach 4 to Mach 4.5. I think what's really interesting about this is it's got a very broad remit, okay? So this destroyer, the air defence system, the Sea Viper, it's got a broad remit in terms of what it's supposed to take out. It's aircraft, it's drones, it's ballistic missiles, it's cruise missiles. So when you're looking at 1.2 million a pop, you've got to understand that wide remit brings into analysis the cost benefit versus the stockpiles.
In terms of the threat from drones, that's an immediate threat. So what is being sent immediately? Yeah,
so there are Lynx Wildcat helicopters. They're going to be deployed into the region. Let's take a look at a picture of this capability. That's the Wildcat. It carries the lightweight multi-role missile, LMM, which is got a range of about 6 to 8 kilometres, and that's specifically designed for a drone threat. It carries 10 on either pylon, so 20 in total. So, you know, a good capability. The questions I've got, though, is that this is a airborne. Here we go. You can see the missiles under the Wildcat there. This is an airborne capability. There is a similar system that's ground-based that carries the same missile that's called Rapid Sentry. Now, when you're dealing with helicopters, I used to fly them for 20 years, they've got a certain amount of endurance, and so they can be in the air only for a specific amount of time. So I think the big questions on deploying this capability are how they're going to keep a 24/7 coverage for a drone threat using these helicopters rather than what's called Rapid Sentry, which is the ground-based system.
Mikey, thanks for telling us about those latest deployments. Before we take a break, just to bring you up to date, the Israeli army saying new missiles have been launched from Iran. Explosions have been heard in Iraq's Erbil, and the US Embassy also telling Americans to leave Iraq now. So those some of the latest developments. Back here in just a moment or two around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News.
What is Moldova? It has organic agriculture, delicious wines from cellars spanning more than 200 kilometers, an EU-integrated IT sector, which makes exports seamless, bringing Moldovan produce to Europe in up to 4 truck days. That's Moldova, where export opportunities abound, and your investment makes Europe an even better place to be. Proudly Moldovan, and diligently EU compliant.
Welcome back, and it is, of course, day 5 of this Iran war. There's also been more Israeli military action in southern Lebanon. Let's get the latest from Wira Davis, who's in Beirut for us, following developments.
UNIFIL is the United Nations border force that monitors and tries to demarcate the border between Israel and Lebanon. And in the last few minutes, we've heard from UNIFIL. It says that
Decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
More evacuation orders in southern Beirut as Israel intensifies attacks on Hezbollah. The US military confirms it torpedoed an Iranian warship off the coast of Sri Lanka. At least 80 people have been killed. Iran continues to fire back, with strikes reported across the Gulf, including in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait and Qatar. Thousands more Britons prepare to leave the United Arab Emirates. Millions of Americans are also scrambling to get out. The BBC understands HMS Dragon will not set sail for Cyprus until next week. We will bring you all the very latest live from our teams across the region. One separate headline, a Labour MP says her husband has never given her reason to think he's broken the law following the arrest of 3 men on suspicion of spying for China. Hello and welcome to BBC News on this day 5 of the Iran war. The US and Israel are continuing their operations. Large explosions have been reported in Tehran, where Israel says it has begun a new wave of broad-scale strikes. The number of people killed in Iran is reported to have gone over 1,000 civilians since the conflict began. The US Secretary of Defense has insisted the US is winning and vowed that Iran cannot outlast the United States. Pete Hegseth also confirmed a torpedo fired by a US submarine has sunk an Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean. The Sri Lankan foreign minister says at least 80 people were killed. More than 30 people have been rescued. Well, Iran is also continuing to carry out attacks across the Middle East, with reports of missiles and drones being shot down as they headed towards countries including Turkey, Israel, Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. This was the scene in Dubai yesterday as a drone reportedly hit the US consulate there. One more image to show you. This missile fell to the ground in an open field in the Kurdish-controlled parts of northeastern Syria. Well, in a moment we will get the latest from our correspondents in Washington, in Westminster and here in the BBC newsroom. But first, this report from Alison Freeman.
Signs of another night of strikes in Iran as smoke billows above Tehran. The US-based human rights activist news agency says more than 1,000 civilians have died in the US-Israel offensive since Saturday. And in Lebanon, more scenes of destruction as Israel continues to target Iran-based Hezbollah compounds. The US says that more than 2,000 targets have been hit in Iran so far, with more than 50,000 troops taking part in this joint operation. And Iran is striking back. Warnings issued in Israel last night. Israeli forces intercepting Iranian fire. People flee in Dubai as plumes of smoke rise high from an attack on a car park next to the US consulate. The sky above Erbil in northern Iraq is lit up as Iranian drones are fired at. And the UK Maritime Trade Operations Centre said an unknown projectile struck a ship off the coast of Fujairah. Iran is standing firm in its retaliation.
What we are doing is targeting the places where attacks against Iran are instigated. This conforms to the international law. We are subjected to military aggression. We have the right and duty to defend. When military actions is being taken against us from the bases in regional countries, what are we supposed to do other than defending ourselves?
In Iran itself, state media has announced that funeral ceremonies for the assassinated supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, have been postponed. Iranian sources have said his second son, Mojtaba Khamenei, survived the attacks and is seen as a likely successor. But Israel's defence minister has said any successor would be a target for elimination. The UK has begun what it calls defensive operations. A fighter jet from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus shoots down an Iranian missile over Jordan, in this footage from the Ministry of Defence. The Prime Minister says other resources like these helicopters will be sent to the region along with the air defence destroyer HMS Dragon. Today, Keir Starmer defended his decisions in the Commons after criticism from the US President Donald Trump.
The protection of UK nationals is our number one priority. And we're taking action to reduce the threat with planes in the sky in the region, intercepting incoming strikes, deploying more capability to Cyprus, and allowing US planes to use UK bases to take out Iran's capability to strike.
Last night, the American military named the first 4 of its troops to be killed. US Central Command said 6 died when a tactical operations centre was struck in Kuwait on Sunday. The US has said that its action will only intensify in its war with Iran.
You're going to really begin to perceive a change in the scope and in the intensity of these attacks as, frankly, the 2 most powerful air forces in the world take apart this terroristic regime and defang it and take away its ability to threaten its neighbors or hide behind a zone of immunity that allows them to develop their nuclear ambitions.
It is a common sight now, a rescue in Iran after a strike. The regime here remains in place whilst the attacks continue, with no clear indication from the US of what will lead to the end of this war. Alison Freeman, BBC News.
Well, we have heard from the US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth speaking at the Pentagon earlier. He said he knows that the US is winning this war. He says Iran cannot outlast the US. And as he put it, the Iranian regime was, quote, toast.
America is winning. Decisively, devastatingly, and without mercy. Under the direct command of President Trump, the War Department unleashed this operation early Saturday morning, just 4 days ago, which means we need to remember 2 things. First, we are only 4 days into this. Metrics are shifting, dust is settling, and more forces are arriving. It's very early. And as President Trump has said, we will take all the time we need to make sure that we succeed. Second, we are only 4 days into this, and the results have been incredible. Historic, really. Only the United States of America could lead this, only us. But when you add the Israeli Defense Forces, a devastatingly capable force, the combination is sheer destruction for our radical Islamist Iranian adversaries. They are toast, and they know it. Or at least, soon enough, they will know it.
Well, let's get the latest from our teams. Joining me live from Washington is our North America correspondent, Helena Humphrey. In Westminster, our political correspondent, Harry Farley, waiting to talk to me. And here in the studio is Mikey Kay, military analyst from the BBC's Security Brief. Helena, let's go to you. We were just listening there to Pete Hegseth. He could not have been more bullish, could he?
No, indeed. Many people characterising this as fighting talk from the US Secretary of Defence, saying that these attacks, this war has only just begun, warning the interim leadership in Iran that the United States will rain down death and destruction, he said, all day long, saying that more US warplanes are now heading to the region. So certainly I think it's fair to say a bullish tone from him. He's saying that we will take all the time needed to ensure that this war is a success. I think, contrast that to what President Trump, for example, had said on the campaign trail, saying that he would not be taking the US into protracted conflicts, to so-called forever wars. But the Secretary of Defence was saying that in terms of the firepower currently being used, that they used almost double that than what was used in Iraq in 2003 with those opening strikes, shock and awe, as they were known at the time. And he claims that this is paying off, that this is having success, that the US has been able to essentially take out Iran's air force, their navy, something that the US hasn't been able to, or the BBC, I should say, hasn't been able to independently verify. But he spoke of that Iranian warship in the Indian Ocean, saying they believed they were safe in international waters. Instead, he said quiet death, speaking of that torpedo which led to the sinking of that vessel. Another vessel he spoke about, the Soleimani, saying that that was the prized Iranian warship, that they also struck that, saying, well, I guess President Trump got Soleimani twice, because remember that was named after Qasem Soleimani, the leader of the elite Quds force who President Trump assassinated in